My name's Rachel Hicks. I'm a senior accountant at Zeifmans LLP, and I'm also a member of the Startup and Technology team, and just would like to welcome everyone to Zeifmans Non-Resident Digital Event Series, Technology and Startups Edition, Expansion and Innovation. Before we begin our interview session with Aly Somani, partner at Cassels Brock Blackwell LLP, I would like to quickly tell you a little bit about Zeifmans. Zeifmans is a full-service tax, accounting, and consulting firm based in Toronto, Canada. At Zeifmans, we go beyond traditional accounting services to offer strategic financial guidance, ensuring that you and your startup team is taking advantage of every single opportunity that's available to you. I would like to officially introduce Aly Somani. And Aly, would you like to tell us a little bit about what it is that you do?
Sure, yeah, thanks, Rachel. So my name is Aly Somani. I'm a partner in the business law group at Cassels. And Cassels is a national leading full service law firm with over 200 lawyers across Canada, with offices in Calgary, Vancouver, and Toronto. And I'm in the Toronto office. In addition to being a partner in the group, I'm also the co-chair of the High Growth and Venture Capital Group. And what that means is I get to work with early stage companies right from formation and early organization idea stage to all the way to an exit and everything in between. So the benefit of that is, we get to see the growth capital stage. We get to work with investors, whether it's friends and family, through to venture capital and more sophisticated investors, all the way to potentially strategic exits or even go public transactions. The other benefit of my role is that I'm also working with the investors, and what that means is I get to be on the other side of the table. So when on the investor side, we get to look at these early stage companies and understand what these venture capital funds are looking for. So get to see what it takes to be ready for an investment from a fund or an angel.
Great. Oh, yeah. Pretty interesting stuff. Yeah, I guess we'll just hop right on into the questions here.
Sounds good.
So yeah, just to start off, from a legal standpoint, what are the key issues that a non-resident startup needs to be aware of coming into Canada?
For sure. Yeah, it's an important question. And I think the one thing I'd address offhand is that it's also as important to be getting good cross-border tax advice. And Rachel or someone else at Zeifmans can kind of help you on that. But it goes hand in hand with the legal advice you're going to be getting from the outset. And so number one being, with your accounting advice is understand really whether you're doing business in Canada or you're doing business with Canada, because the tax implications are disparate. And if you're doing business in Canada, then from a legal standpoint, you've got to really understand where you need to register your business. And so if the way the Canadian legal system is set up is that we have multiple provinces, territories, and we have a federal regime as well. And wherever you are conducting business, and that test is a bit different in each jurisdiction, you need to register. And one thing that many of my non-resident clients kind of is a bit of a curveball for them is that if you set up a business in Ontario or a federal business, 25% of your directors of that corporation need to be resident Canadians. So practically what it means is if you have 4 or less directors, one of them needs to be a Canadian resident. One of the other issues that many of our non-resident clients face and find interesting about Canadian law is our employment law. And I'd say that at least for our American counterparts, we have an employee friendly system. And while many things are similar in other parts of the world with kind of minimum entitlements and standards and anti-discriminatory practices, there are also, I'd say, better termination type entitlements for employees in Canada that should be aware of from the outset. I think the other thing to keep in mind is that as a startup, when you're bringing on employees or independent contractors, many of them might be, helping you develop IP or, getting access to confidential information. And so what we suggest to many of our startup clients is get a good form of employment agreement set up from the outset. And a firm like Cassels can kind of help you provide that form, and it could be replicated as you move forward. So it's a fairly simple thing to get right from the outset, and it could cause you a lot of, avoid you a lot of grief later on.
Yeah, definitely a lot to consider. So good to get some good legal advice there.
Yeah.
How much attention should a startup give to structuring and formation documents?
So the assumption being that you as a startup are going out to raise money, because when you do go out to raise money, your investors are going to, I guess, kick the tires, they say, and look at your docs. They're gonna dig into it, and investors are becoming more and more sophisticated, and understand what a well-organized company looks like. And the analogy I hear a lot is, if you're gonna sell your house, you're gonna clean it up before you put it on the market. And it's a similar thing if you're gonna go out and raise money. You want to present yourself in a good light. And to organize your company, really, it just means ensuring that you've issued shares correctly, that your directors have been appointed correctly, your officers have been appointed, you have all your resolutions in place. And for a law firm, it's a really simple task to have that done properly from the outset, and it's cheap. It's something you can get done quickly and cheaply, and it's something that when you do go out to raise money, your investors are going to care about it, and they're going to make you stand behind the fact that your books are in order, and that they're up to date.
Yeah, great. What stage should a startup engage in developing a shareholder agreement?
So it's a good question. I'd say there's many instances where a shareholders agreement is super important for a business. There's, if you think about it, just kind of simply, you have individuals that come together to help, a mission and grow your business. And along the way, there's going to be obstacles, and there's going to be shareholders that come in, and there's going to be shareholders that leave. And the best way to govern how that's going to work and avoid potential serious conflict is to lay it out in a shareholders agreement. So it's a given that when you do go raise third-party money, you're going to be putting in place a shareholders agreement. So that's a given. But kind of taking a step back, at really the early stage when you're kind of forming your business and growing the idea, there are instances where it might not be as important. If you have a co-founder, and you and your co-founder hold an equal amount of shares in the company, you're both directors, you can't really do anything without the other person. So a shareholders agreement sometimes isn't as important. In instances it could be. But when you start having an unequal share capital base, and when you have individuals that are holding shares that have obligations tied to those shares, you kind of want to lay it out in that shareholders agreement. And whether you're considering putting one in place or not, I'd suggest you speak to legal counsel early on, have that conversation, and you might or might not need it. You might wait until you do your first raise and then put it in place, because that's going to happen anyways. So so the answer is kind of depends, and have that discussion. But it's good to keep it in mind.
Yeah. Great. When moving from raising capital from friends and family, when do you need to start worrying about securities rules and regulations?
Okay, so yeah, that's the legal question for sure, and technical legal question, because the reality is the default in Canadian law is that anytime you issue a security, whether it's a safe, a convertible note, a warrant, and or equity, the kind of true sense of equity, then you do have to comply with securities regulations. And the default being that a company, an issuer, would file a prospectus, which is a very long, expensive, time-consuming document to prepare. And so obviously that's not what has to happen every time, or else no early stage private company could ever raise money. And there's quite a few exemptions to filing a prospectus, whether it's friends and family, as you mentioned, or close business associates, or accredited investors, which is typically the exemption that's used with respect to raising money from angels or venture capital funds. And so it is something that you have to think about every time you issue an equity or security.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Last question here we have for you. What are some of the key considerations from a legal standpoint when raising money from Canadian VCs and angels?
Yeah, so I guess the answer to that is partly understanding what the Canadian venture capital kind of association or the industry is what stage they're at. And I'd say that in the 10 years or so that I've been in this world, it's becoming more and more sophisticated. And I think we're catching up to the US in the sense that we have a set of model documents that almost all venture capital funds in Canada or angels will kind of put in place. And so what it really means is that this group, this industry is fairly consistent in the way that they're doing deals, which is good for companies. It reduces friction. There's less legal fees. There's quicker time to closing a deal. But the key considerations are, even though there are a handful of items, they're still important, and they're things that are going to come up when you're doing a raise, like liquidation preferences or the type of preferred shares that a venture capital fund is going to be looking for. So I guess the best way to answer it is, when you do get to that stage and you are looking for more sophisticated financing, then speak with your counsel and kind of understand up front that there are certain things that investors are going to look for. And if they're being overly aggressive, then you'll get good advice to potentially drop that investor and maybe look for someone else. And so it's, I guess, to round it off, the venture capital industry in Canada is becoming, I think, more leaning more towards the US side. They're becoming a bit fairer. There's less aggressive tactics or provisions that they take from back in the day. So I guess get in touch with your counsel before you do a raise, and they'll help you kind of guide you through it.
Great, thanks. Lots of great information there. That's awesome. Did you have any final words of advice for startups coming to Canada?
For sure, yeah. So I guess that I'd say now is probably the best time in my experience, the best time to be setting up in Canada, whether it's you're coming in to acquire a business, whether you're coming in to set up. The industry here is like on a rocket ship, and especially in Toronto where I am. It's amazing how many tech jobs there are. It's incredible how many companies are being funded. We have, the last stat I heard is that we have over 100 accelerators and incubators in Toronto alone, and there's clusters of like that in Waterloo, in Ottawa, in Vancouver, and Calgary. So it's an amazing time to be in this space in Canada and in Toronto specifically. So I guess I'd leave it with, if you're considering setting up shop in Canada, whether Toronto or another part of the country, myself or any of my colleagues at Cassels would be happy to chat with you and kind of have just a frank discussion about whether what legal advice you might need from the outset, and kind of help you grow your business.
Nice, great. Sounds
Yeah,
like exciting times in Canada here for
yeah.
startups. It's great. Thank you very much, Ali. And thank you for everyone else who's joined us today. If you have any questions, just check out our bio on Instagram. Follow the link there. And you can book a one-on-one meeting with one of our members of our startup and technology team. So great. Thank you again, Ali. That was great. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Yeah, you too, Rachel. Thanks so much.
No problem. See you.